All right. Hello, everybody. My name is JD Velilla with the Global Wellness Institute and also Tuft and Needle. We're actually here with Thom Downing, the owner of FiT Los Altos, and we're going to have a great conversation for you guys. So real quick, FiT Los Altos is a health optimization facility whose main objective is optimizing their clients' metabolic health, utilizing a holistic approach that I think all of you are going to find very interesting. So that said, I'm going to turn it over to Thom. And Thom, just introduce yourself. Tell us about your background, your experience, and really what led you to creating FiT.
Yeah, thanks, JD. I appreciate it. I'm so excited to just have this conversation with you and those folks that are listening out there. My background really is so diverse. I come from a small village in Alaska, and I was a commercial fisherman, and my father was a bush pilot. And so there's no connection to the health and wellness space for me early on, except for the fact that I was really excited to be involved in athletics and in sport and in movement. And that led me to getting a bachelor's degree and also a master's degree in kinesiology. And from there, I was able to work in a multitude of different spaces. So I worked in the clinical setting under the direction of physiatrists and orthopedic surgeons, physical therapists. I worked with some professional sports organizations with the San Francisco Giants organization, the San Jose Sharks with ice hockey, worked with youth athletics. And so I really had a good, wide variety of clientele and trainers and wonderful coaches and mentors that sort of brought me into the space of strength and conditioning and personal training. And so I was able to see that from a side where you're raising money to build these facilities to really help people on a day-to-day basis learn how to take the things that they always sort of know they should do and turn them into things that they always are doing. And so that's, probably for me, that was the biggest aha moment in my career, was sort of learning through all these different phases and these different lenses, and then finally coming into, owning my own facility starting in 2000. So for the last 22 years here in Silicon Valley, Los Altos specifically, working with real high performers and folks that you probably all know from the technology industry and just common folks, stay-at-home moms and dads like myself in their 50s and some younger athletes and non-athletes. And so the last 20 years has just been a real eye-opening experience for me and very, very rewarding. So I know that circuitous route that I've taken to sort of get to this point in my career really was for a reason. And I'm doing everything that I want to do right now in my day-to-day. So I love what I do.
Awesome. Well, let me ask you this. So, as part of the sleep initiative for the Global Wellness Institute, how have you seen sleep evolve as part of, the program that you offer your clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's why we're here, right? We're talking about sleep. And, through failure throughout the years where we really tried to create templates, early on for folks to follow, regardless of what they were coming into with what we call objectives, but we also call goals, right? Regardless of that, we always sort of wanted to fit them into a template. And we figured that exercise and movement was the answer to every issue that every person had, right? And so we're not saying that exercise and movement isn't important. However, as we began to learn through our failures with client after client struggling to stay consistent with movement, we really began a deep dive probably 15 years ago into the importance of what we all know is eating strategy, right? I mean, everyone points to exercise and diet as sort of the two main things in metabolic health or performance, or longevity, whatever we're looking at for that individual. However, we really understood and began to understand how important sleep was. So important. Stanford's right up the road from us. And so we were learning so much from them. And it's so important that, that I think mainstream media now has kind of picked up on that. And I don't think there's really anyone out there now that doesn't realize how important sleep is to our overall health profile, our mood, our energy, our productivity. More than 60 different hormones are affected by chronic sleep deprivation. So it just became so critical for us to move it up the hierarchy when we began to look at our holistic approach, that right now it sits at number one or number two things that we try to really work with the client, obviously for them around behavior change, to just create a more peaceful, more rewarding and stress-free sleep experience. And that for us didn't come naturally from the very beginning. It came through years and years of trying, to figure out for that individual what they were dealing with in their life and their reality, and then working with them to figure out some solutions to focus on sleep. So, I mean, it compounds stress. We all know these things, right? I mean, it's any gains that you're making in the gym, poor sleep is going to destroy that. It makes you more insulin resistant, to name a few. And psychologically, it makes the exercise feel harder, makes decision-making tougher. So these things just become so critical for us to focus on with people. And it's been really rewarding to watch people be able to get a hold of that, create a win in that sleep area of their life, and begin to notice the profound effect it has in all areas of their life.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I wanted to talk about was when you say holistic approach, and we know sleep is a part of that. Can you tell us like some of the most, like maybe the top 3 to 5 common things, people walking through your door are struggling with? Is there do you see a common thread amongst everyone, or is it very specific to the individual?
Right. Well, both. We see both. And I think a lot of times folks, a lot of the objectives they come in with are the same as anywhere that you'll see. People want to lose fat, they want to put on lean muscle mass, and they want to have more energy. And so what we have done really is we've tried to step back a little bit and help them to identify what their particular reality is in that moment that they're entering our facility. So we have a real robust intake process. We spend 2 hours with each client, really learning their reality. How are they eating? What's worked for them in the past? How is their sleep right now? What could be disrupting that? Have they seen someone for that? So I think that piece really separates us and makes it more holistic, is the fact that we have these big, lofty, general goals that I think most people across the globe all share in common. And what we don't share is our individual reality, the life that we're living day to day. And so people have anxiety and stress and feel like they can't accomplish these large goals that are life-changing. I mean, you and I have talked about this. It's hard enough for me to change one behavior. It's really, really hard to get someone else to change behaviors, right? And so we just want to empower them with knowledge. We want to, provide sort of a long-term learning environment. We are teachers first, and we're also learners. We're helping the client to learn about themselves, probably things they already know about themselves, and just giving them permission to speak about those things. And then let's use those first. Let's use those little things that will and have worked for you. And let's not completely do a remodel on the house. Let's just do a little tweak here or there. Let's just make some small, what almost seems so simplistic changes to your eating strategy and your sleep and your movement strategy. And then let's just be aware of it. Let's not try to make too many changes too fast for these folks. Let's just, for the first 7 days, become aware of those decisions, those choices, those habits that we're making around sleep and that we're making around our movement. And let's give ourselves permission to, look a little bit deeper and start to experiment a little bit. And that's sort of how we look at it.
Yeah. It's so funny. Like I just turned 42. I'm starting to see a lot of research around like how my body is changing, how my fitness and diet requirements are changing. I'm physically active. I obviously take sleep very seriously, but I know I'm very lazy when it comes to diet. And so it's interesting to hear, how your approach to all of that. And I was wondering, when we talk about metabolic health, can you give like a brief, chat or just kind of walk us through, the role that you see hormones and cortisol and all of those things playing into the programs that you create?
Yeah, I think that's a deeper level conversation for most people, right? That those conversations happen behind the scenes for us. We do have a lot of physicians that are our clients here, a lot of very discerning and smart individuals. So we do need to stay very current. But for us, really, it becomes important that we're creating an ecosystem that when the person sees their doctor or our concierge doctor, that they feel like they have sort of what is described as metabolic health intact, regardless of what they may look like from the outside. So for instance, we may have some clients that are bigger or larger in nature, right? Or smaller in nature as far as their body type or size, but their blood works are great. They have really good, their mental health is solid. They're happy at home. They have a good family life. And so we get caught up sometimes in the fringes of what mainstream media might want us to picture as healthy. But we've seen both ends of the spectrum too often with people where those sort of avatars for those individuals don't really hold much value because the person looks a certain way and mainstream media tells us, well, they must be in great condition. They must be healthy, but they're really not. And the other end of the spectrum as well, where someone looks unhealthy, but really from the inside and from a mental health perspective and from their choices they're making, they actually really are. And so we had to reframe all that. And the first thing we had to do is define metabolic health. If you go onto Google and you try to find a definition of that, each physician, each functional medicine doc, each psychiatrist, each area is trying to find their own definition of metabolic health. And so whether you include hormone profile, blood pressure, the potential for diabetes or fasting blood sugar and fasting insulin levels, do you include a mental health part of that? I feel that you do. Some folks don't include that in metabolic health. So for us, the way we look at it, that's a higher level objective measurement that we look at. Some of our clients that come in right away want to engage in that higher level. And so we refer right out to our concierge doctor, who then orders a comprehensive blood panel from Boston Heart Labs. They also then do a full sex hormone profile on them. And that gives us a whole bunch of information about what's going on inside. We couple that then with a body fat analysis and a lean muscle mass. Now you can imagine your head's probably ready to blow up right now because you love the technology and you love all these numbers and this data, but some folks just they're just not on that path yet. And if in the past, what we've done is that was sort of part of the on-ramping process, and it was just too much for people, too much too soon. I love it because I love data and I love big data and I love research and I love the metrics and I love being able to see on the inside and the out and share it all. But most people really aren't ready for that level of interpretation yet. What do you do with that information? What are the actionable pieces, right? You and I have talked about, we have technology, we have research, right? And then we have the reality, the practical world that we are all living in. And we act, you and I and others in this industry that are in a helping industry, a coaching industry, teaching, we become the bridge between that gray area of academia and technology and life, sort of just living your life, right? So hormones are important and very critical to us as well, but you have to really be ready for that. Now, if you are into performance or if you are sick absolutely, then we definitely would start there. And that's where we would allow our physicians and our specialists to help guide us and the patient slash client on what an actual healthy metabolic profile is for that person. So I know that doesn't answer your question specifically, but hopefully it gives you an idea of sort of which client would fit in to which path when they start with us, and that all the hormones can be important, but initially for most people, those become less important until we begin this awareness project where we just begin to becoming more in tune and in touch with how our body is feeling, how it's performing, how the choices that we are making. That becomes the foundation for which we then build additional testing on top of.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And actually, I had another question for you, but you kind of answered it in that one, which was, you know, one of the trends that we're seeing a lot of news about is around, you know, different sleep trackers and wearables and things on the market today that help you track your sleep and monitor, you know, that stage of our day where we're just, you know, in an unconscious state. And you kind of answered this already, but I was wondering if you can just expand just a little bit more on this specific topic. You know, what role do you see sleep tracking devices play, if any, in how you coach someone?
Well, that's always a loaded question, and you know, I mean, we should have recorded some of the talks that you and I have had, and some of the other conversations, because I'm in the heart of Silicon Valley, and if I turn my back on technology completely, I probably lose 2/3 of my clients, right? But there's also part of our facility here. We're sort of the unplugged facility. So that's not to say that I don't feel that there is some value in wearables and in trackers. And when we talk about sleep trackers specifically, I do think that the experience that I have had in a real world is that unless that particular device that you're using has actionable data that we can help to build a framework of change around, I'm not sure why we would continue to build the stress around that, because it is so complex to measure sleep. They're getting better and better, and hopefully in my lifetime, you know, technology, the curve just goes straight up, right? And so these things are being developed, and you know, the not the residual, but you know, the how well they see into the sleep for the individual is getting better, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think that the way we approach that is that if someone is motivated, let's just say by a calorie counter or an app where you're counting calories, it's grossly inaccurate. We know that from an internal perspective, but they are motivated and it has worked for them. So what we do is we try to take particular time frames. We bracket all of our use of technology by calling it an experiment. And what we're trying to do, whether it's a heart rate monitor or a watch or a ring or whatever it might be, measuring sleep, something on your mattress, whatever that might be, we try to put brackets around that. 7 days, let's become aware of what that data is giving us. But more importantly, JD, is that we build a set of subjective questions that the client can be asked or ask themselves to know if something indeed is working. So let's use heart rate as an example, right? So what we'll do is for 7 days, we'll put a heart rate monitor on them. We'll have them do what we call low, moderate, and high intensity work with that heart rate and pay particular attention to it. So you're going to it quite a bit. My heart rate is 135. How do you feel? My heart rate is 125. How do I feel? Then what we do is we unplug them from that heart rate monitor. We do those same workouts. And what we try to get from them is a connection or a perception to how they're feeling without having the number in front of them. And so whether that's a sleep tracker or whether that's a calorie counter or whether that's your heart rate monitor, it's plugging in your consciousness to these devices, then asking yourself some subjective questions to see if indeed you are feeling the way the device is telling you. Like if you slept poorly, but you feel great, if the device tells you slept great and you feel poorly, that's just a noticing. Doesn't mean we're going to throw the device away. We're just going to notice that. We're going to become more aware. That becomes really critical for us because, you know, if you can afford the cost of these devices, let's plug in, unplug, become more aware. Plug in, become aware, unplug, then create some actionable, real-time behavior changes for that specific individual with that device. Once it begins demotivating someone or becomes stressful, we try to suggest just removing it completely. Some people become prisoner to this thing. There's even some anxiety that's caused by using too many wearables, especially around sleep, of getting a poor sleep score, and it defeats the purpose of it.
Yep. Yeah, you know, it's really interesting too, right? Like you think about fitness, you think about diet, and you think about sleep. These are all behaviors. And so, you know, your role is really to help people alter people's behaviors and ultimately drive them to a healthier solution and lifestyle. And it makes me wonder, you know, kind of my final question for you is like, what's the key theme that you try to achieve when you coach your clients?
You know, that's changed over the years. I think the key now, and it has been probably for the last decade or so here, is we really, once we learn that person's reality and we learn their objectives, our key for them is to create a win every day, to create momentum based on success, almost to the point where we're trying to get them to identify with a person that is successful or has been successful in accomplishing what they're trying to accomplish, but not getting so caught up in exercise or just sleep or just my eating strategy or just my stress management or just my self-care. Because what happens when we get focused too much on one pillar is that life happens. And all of a sudden you're like, JD's, I can't exercise today. I'm not going to be able to get my movement in. And so what happens to your sense of self-worth and your motivation and it all plummets to the point where we all begin to struggle with these thought distortions. I can't do it. January 19th was National Quitting Day, right? I mean, we all set the targets for our resolutions on the 1st, and by the 19th, that's a horrible thing. And so what we have learned is that if you can create a win around your sleep, if you can create a win around your sleep that one day, but you weren't able to exercise and maybe your eating wasn't great, you still got a win that day. You still got to make another choice in an area that has impact, that is going to propel you to that next day. Now, everyone will tell you, especially here where I work in Silicon Valley, everyone wants 5 gold stars in all 5 categories. But what we're trying to do is release ourselves from that stress, release ourselves from that responsibility. That's not saying that we don't want people to lean in a little bit. And so that it should feel like, hey, I identify, I'm making a choice that's disciplined, but we want to do that depending on what your objectives are and how much you're willing to give up, right? So setting those realistic objections, not, for them anyway. So rather than having these big, huge goals, we really want to make sure that their objectives are living in their reality. And then just enough discipline that they can reach their objectives, but not so much that they're going to lose momentum and feel horrible about the choices they have to make today. So restricting your eating so much, right? Having a strict physical activity regimen that costs a lot of time and energy and may not have the results. I mean, in obesity research, physical activity is about 8 to 10%. I mean, some people say as high as 20, but still, I would want to focus on the other 80, right? And so I think this ecosystem we're trying to create, this one of nurturing ourselves, learning as much as we can, being aware of what works for us, maybe not necessarily the next person, and then creating this win every day to propel us to make better and better decisions and choices. And then eventually becoming that person that we identify with. I identify with a person that climbs mountains. I identify with a person that's thinner. I identify with a person that's stronger. I identify with a person that has more energy, then what would those people that you identify with, what choices will they make in the moment? That's critical to what we do. And that's why I get so fired up talking about it, because we still do the X's and O's really, really well. Our staff and our trainers and our programming and our exercise selection, it is nails, but it's easy.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, that's easy. Changing behavior, changing habit around your sleep, changing your habits around your eating strategy, how to learn and manage your stress appropriately so that you can put the right amount on for you. Now that's a real challenge right there. That's something I can get excited about.
Yeah. And it's all about creating small wins. I love it. I love the idea. Well, cool. So that is all the time we have for today. But actually, the next time we come back, we're going to flip the script a little bit, and it's going to be Tom's opportunity to interview me. So stay tuned for part 2 of this interview.
Yeah, I've got some great questions for you, JD. Thanks for your time today. That was a lot of fun.
All right. Talk soon.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.